Hi, everyone. Happy Sunday afternoon. We are so excited to be here and sharing this fantastic new program with you. I am really delighted to introduce Amelia Lin. Amelia is the CEO and co-founder of Saga, an app that helps families save the life stories of loved ones on audio. Saga has been featured in publications like Forbes and CNET and won the 2020 Innovator Award from Endwell and the AARP. As the daughter of two Chinese immigrants, Amelia started Saga to save her own parents' stories. Prior to founding Saga, she worked at a range of Silicon Valley technology companies, including Udacity and Optimizely. She holds an undergraduate degree in physics and an MBA from Harvard University, and she currently lives in Mountain View, California. So, Amelia, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so looking forward to talking with you more about Saga.
Thank you all so much. I'm just so grateful to the whole team really for inviting me to come on today. And I'm so excited to share a little bit about like my personal story as a kind of an Asian American, like the child of immigrants. I was just watching, your the interview with Rinko and Anna, and it was so incredible and so relatable, and I think just very personally relatable for me and why my own personal journey and why I started Saga. So the way that I'm thinking I'm going to do this is I'm going to share a bit about sort of how I even got started with recording my own family stories, why that was important to me. Although I'm sure for anybody who's been watching you all do your interviews, it doesn't even need to be explained, but how that sort of my adventure on going from that to actually starting a company that helps families to do the same for their own families. And then a little bit about how Saga and sort of Japanese American pilgrimages have been working together like a little bit already. And then I'll kind of just take questions from anyone about my own experience or anything else. So that's sort of the plan. So as Erin just mentioned, I ended up starting a company that actually we help families record loved ones' memories and their voices. But especially for this presentation, I actually wanted to start out with a bit of the personal side and where that even comes from. So this is a photo of my family. That's me up there in the middle, and my mom and my dad and my little sister, Elisa. And I had been begging my own mom and dad to record their stories for many years. They grew up during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. It was this time of incredible turmoil. And I remembered these stories that they used to tell me and my sister when we were little. Just these absolutely incredible stories. And I used to always say to my mom and my dad, I'd say, you got to write these down someday. I want a book, or I almost wish we could make like a documentary about your lives. And every time I would say this to them, they would say, Amelia, that's very sweet. We're very flattered, but maybe after we retire, because that sounds like a lot of work to write a book about our lives. So, I always had this idea kind of in mind of I really, really want to get this stuff saved, not just for me, but for my kids one day and their kids. And I always sort of imagined that. So I I wanted to find a way that something that would make it really easy for them to do so. And I think what's really interesting is that I think I've since learned, learned since then I'm not the only one. So I actually went to this, there was research done around what is the most important thing for people who are 65 and older. Like they did a big poll across the United States and asked people, asked seniors, what is most important to you in sort of being carried on? And the number one answer was values and life lessons, which I think is fascinating because I think we all think about that one that's actually at the bottom of the chart, which is like physical items, you know, who's going to take the house or these items or whatever. And it was just mind blowing to me to realize it was like 3 times as many, you know, people were actually it was really kind of the sentimental and the emotional things that I think are really important to us to sort of pass on. So I started recording my own dad's stories. This is really how Saga started. I literally started this project with, you know, my mom and my dad, and I was like, Mom, Dad, like, will you let me experiment with you? And just recorded these really incredible things from them. I remember like one of the questions I asked my dad to record for me was, what was it like the first time that you ever saw your child? And I won't play the recording. So I got to record his answer there, but you can see a little bit of the clip, and I swear I just start crying when I listen to it. But it really opened up for me, I think, just a whole other side of my parents that I learned so much about them that I hadn't even heard before. And it was an incredible experience for us to just sort of grow closer. I think we're already pretty close as a family, but just discovering more about each other as human beings. So that's why I actually, like, the thing that started out as a personal project with my own family ended up becoming the company that I run today. So that's how I started Saga. It came from a very personal place for me, and I so relate to the work that you all are doing. So I want to share a little bit about what it is that we actually do. So we're an app that helps families save the life stories of loved ones on audio. And so we save it in their own voice, kind of in like in the most genuine way that you can kind of imagine, you know, somebody recording these things for you. And the way that we do it, just in a nutshell, is we send prompts every week, or you can actually write your own too. So sometimes people will come up with their own. And then you can answer the question. So the storyteller in your family, as we like to call them, or storytellers, can answer it in one of 2 ways. They can either use the app, which is free, or even if they don't have a smartphone or don't want to use a smartphone, they can record just by dialing a special phone number that we have. So, and they can dial from any place. So you don't have to have a smartphone, you don't have to type, and you can even call from a landline. And then what we do is we'll take the recorded answers, and the questions that we ask are things like, you know, who was your best friend growing up and stuff like that. So you can choose from our own question bank, or you can write your own. We take those recorded answers and then we collect them and share them privately with the family that's in the channel. So it's kind of, the way I describe it to people is it's kind of like getting a podcast from your family of your family's memories. And then you not only have the recording, but you can actually, as you're listening to it, like comment and react as you're listening, and it'll sort of save the reactions at the timestamps of where that happened. So it's like you not only have the recordings, but there's these conversations that get spawned from them, which I feel like is actually the most special part, is kind of like oh my gosh, I didn't realize you ever did that. Like, tell me more about that. Sort of that back and forth. It reminds me a lot, actually, of in the way that you guys do the elder sessions that almost like that live feed that goes on the side a little bit. Like if you can kind of imagine that is sort of what happens. So that's sort of the nutshell of, this company that our team has kind of built. But it came from a very, very personal place for me. And the last thing that I wanted to just chat a bit about is like where this has kind of led to today. So I was introduced to Kamiko actually through a mutual acquaintance of ours. And I'm so, so excited just to share that we've already started capturing memories from some of the members of the community. I know that I just saw one come in from Shig, and that was 2 hours long. And I'm so excited for you all because there's just, I think as you all know, there's so many incredible stories that are buried in just everyday people's experiences. And that's really, I think that was the motivation for me starting the company, was feeling like I really wanted to capture. I had heard my mom and dad's stories a million times, right? It's not like I never heard them, but I wanted to really capture and save them, right? I didn't just want it to only live in my memory. I really wanted to have those saved so that like my kids could listen to them someday. And so they could hear them from the perspective of the person who lived through it, and not just me saying, well, did you know your grandpa went through blah, blah, blah? I just knew that wasn't going to be as impactful in the way that I wanted it to be. So that's a bit about sort of my personal journey of how Saga started, how we've gotten to where we are today, how the service actually works, and how I'm really excited to be sort of partnering with you all going forward. And I'm really looking forward to we want to make sure we give really great support and attention to any member of the Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages community who wants to try out Saga. We want to answer any questions. We love any like suggestions or feedback. And yeah, I'll pause there, and would love to just happy to answer any questions from anyone.
Hi, Amelia. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Thank you so much for sharing. This is such an exciting app that I think so many of the folks who've been participating in the pilgrimage will be really excited to try out. And I think those of us who have heard some of Shig's stories before are not surprised that recording is 2 hours long. That is really amazing, though. So
I think he set the record, honestly.
Sure
I don't know that we've ever had a 2 hour long one come in.
Have you listened to it yet?
I can't wait. I've not listened to it yet, but I've been told to prepare myself.
Yes,
I'm so excited.
Some gems in there. Yeah, but no, I love that this is something that folks can record, and all of the stories that we sometimes don't know to ask about, but it seems like you've really built in ways to have those stories come out, which is awesome. I'm wondering in how you shared your own story. Some of the maybe challenges or surprises that came about with asking your own, like it can be a challenge to interview your own parents. So
yes,
I'm wondering if you can say more about your approach to actually coming up with those questions and kind of having those conversations happen, and anything in particular that surprised you or that you learned along the way.
Yes. Oh, that's such a good question. So one of the things that I think we learned pretty early on, actually, as we were building Saga, and it was from my own personal experience too, right?
Yeah.
There's a sense of, it's like, you want to get these stories, but you might not always know where to start. And I think, frankly, even my mom and dad weren't quite sure where to start. They're like, okay, you want us to tell the stories of our lives? Well, that's a really big story. Like, where to even start? And so one of the things that we definitely learned and that we built into Saga was this sort of question bank of just like hundreds of ideas. And it's one of the things that people actually say the most. They're like, oh, thank goodness, like relief. You've got some questions to start with. And we actually, those came from, at the beginning, it was a lot of us really talking to the families that we were working with and saying, like, what do you think? Like, what questions do you want to ask? And we would just like show them lots and lots of questions we were coming up with. And then sometimes people would come up with, they were like, oh, well, this is one I really want to ask I'm going to ask my mom this one. We're like, oh, that's a really good one. We should like put that in the question bank. But I will say, I have a few favorites. I'll share like a few. I mean, it's one. So that one that I showed that my dad actually answered is actually one of my favorites, which is, do you remember what went through your mind the first time you ever saw your child? It's this incredible moment where, I mean, we just don't ever even think to ask our moms and dads that question, really, right? Like, that's just like, that doesn't just come up in everyday conversation. And I also think it's one of those questions where maybe when you're a little bit younger, when you're like a kid, you don't really appreciate like the impact of that answer.
Right.
But when you hear it from, your parents, your grandparents, like, I think especially as you grow older, and even more so if you have your own kids, it's an incredibly intimate and moving thing to hear that, you just may never have heard before. So I do particularly love that one. Another one that I really like is, what's the biggest trouble you ever got into when you were a kid? That one's really fun. That one's really fun. Like, sometimes you were like, they have this image of grandma in one way, and then grandma's like, oh, let me tell you about the shenanigans that, I got up to when I was 19 or whatever. And just like these hilarious stories. And then yeah, exactly. Cause, those are a couple of my personal favorites. And hopefully that helps answer a little bit of the like things that we've learned, some of the challenges, and I think how we tried to make that easier for people to start the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's so great, because I know, when I've done oral histories in the past or gone to interview folks, I felt nervous. Like, I don't know enough about, the history of that particular moment or all of this other background stuff that I should know. So I'm not going to do this yet, or I'm not going to ask these questions. But I love that as part of the app, it's like, no, these are how you get to know people, these sort of questions that you can relate to, because, this person was a kid at one point too, or this person got in trouble at some point. It's so great. Right. And then you're reminded of the humanity of your grandparents or your parents. And I think that's a really important and beautiful message that you've built in. So how would someone get started with using Saga? Like, how easy is it to get your elders or your family members involved? And how does that kind of logistical side of the process work?
Right. A great question. So I have really good news, which is that basically we have just we released the free version of the app relatively recently. So right now it's like it's still free. So you should totally go. It doesn't cost anything. You should totally go check it out. And like, it's the way that you and one of the things that we kind of built in was the ability for you to add in family members without them having to download the app. That was really important to us, just to make sure that it was accessible and easy for anybody in the family to use. So in fact, like when you set up your family account, you can basically set up certain phone numbers where you say, anybody who kind of dials in from this phone number, that should be saved and then like shared with our family account. So we try to make it really easy for you to help set up other members of the family. You can go check out the link to the app. You can find it at our website, which is trysaga.com, and you can find it there. Or you can go in the App Store and search for it. If you search like Saga Family Podcast is the name of the app, Saga Family Podcast, you'll find it. And the other thing I also really want to encourage is I have included my contact information here because we want to make sure that just like anybody in your community who tries out the app, like we really want to hear what we can do to make it better, like anything that we can do to make it just like a really awesome experience for you all. So we just wanted to give you all like a direct line to our team, so we can help with anything too.
That's yeah, and I mean this pilgrimage community is kind of a really perfect place to have as folks who are used to collecting oral histories and have some ideas, but are especially now that we're living in these pandemic times, looking for other ways to be recording and connecting with family members. A question I have that I don't know if you mentioned, but is there like a Saga community? Like if you're on the app, are you able to listen into other family groups, or are there, which not in a creepy way, but are there opportunities to like hear stories from other communities that are using Saga? Is there a way that the sharing is happening, or what's the kind of app community like right now?
Such a good question. So all of the channels are by default, they're private. So you control kind of who gets invited into that channel and therefore can see all of the stories. I can flip back to, like, this is one where, like if this were my family, we would be we have control over kind of who's listening, but we have had people start asking, like, I would be totally cool with my story being shared more broadly. And I feel like you all really do that well with your elder sessions. And so it's definitely something we've been thinking about. We have a little program that we call Heroes of Saga, where people can actually nominate family members to have their stories celebrated and elevated publicly. So that's something that we've just started. And secretly, I'm also thinking that I'm like, oh, how could we get some of our users onto your interviews too? So yeah, the ability to kind of share stories more broadly is something that we're thinking about for sure.
Yeah, because even with schools and with teaching some of this history, or any kind of history, it's so powerful to be able to include personal stories or to hear from someone themselves of their experience living through something or encountering, something you're learning about in a textbook. So I could even see this being a really fascinating, having an interesting educational piece to it as well in the future, which is kind of connected. What are your hopes for Saga and your dreams for what will happen with this app and this company?
Oh, yeah, it's so funny. So, as I kind of mentioned, this started as a very personal project for me. It started with like literally me and my mom and my dad. And I think what happened was that, the more families that we worked with, and especially in the early days, just the kinds of notes that we would get back from families about, like, I just listened to my mom's story and I called her and we talked for an hour, or like I learned something about my dad that I never knew before.
Yeah.
I thought I knew all his stories, right? And the connections that it can open up, I think, between people, which I think you all see all the time, I'm sure as well. That's what really convinced us that we wanted to make, like, we wanted the world to know that that this existed, and that and I also can't tell you like how many times we've heard from families like, I wish I'd known about this, like, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or that I could have had this for someone special in my life. And so our dream is that this is something that every family could use, like literally every family, like everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's one of those things where I think I hadn't realized before how many people were already thinking about it. Like I had this dream to do this with my mom and my dad for so many years, but I never really told anybody about it. I didn't like talk to other people and be like, hey, have you ever thought about doing this too?
Yeah.
And when I started working on Saga, I couldn't believe how many coworkers and friends and stuff would just say, we've been thinking about doing that, or we've actually tried to do that, and like my Uncle Joe has a couple of voice memos like saved on his phone, and that's it. And no one's ever gotten to hear them. And in fact, like, I don't even know where they are. Right. And it just felt crazy to us that, like, how can we live in this day and age with this much technology? And how could this not be easier? So yeah, we really hope that this becomes something where everybody, like, that everyone's story is worth saving, like really, like everybody's story is worth saving, and that we hope every family gives us a try someday, basically.
Oh yeah, no, as I've learned more about Saga from you, I do wish that this had existed, 10, 15 years ago, and that I could have recorded these stories with my grandparents and other folks in our family. But I know we had a project in 5th grade where we had to interview one of our grandparents and write their life story. And those, even as little kids, writing those stories were so valuable to us. When our grandparents passed away, we were able to share those little books and all that. So I totally agree that recording stories is so important. And I'm grateful to you all for creating this app and making it so possible in a way that's so meaningful and really does literally preserve voices. It's really awesome. I'm wondering, has your relationship with your family, with your parents, with your sister, with your extended family, how has that shifted or changed since
Oh,
you've recorded all these stories?
it's so funny. I remember that as Saga changed from just like a kind of a one person project into really kind of a service and then a company. So we have like a full team today that really works on Saga, which is, it's so crazy to me, kind of thinking about sort of how far we've come.
Yeah.
Um, I used to joke with my friends, and that I've heard a million stories about how I think when you start a business or start a company in any kind of, or an organization in any sense, like it can become really all consuming. And I think that sometimes we'll see that it can be a very isolating experience. And sort of people be like, oh, I feel like it sort of took me away
Yeah.
from like my loved ones for some time. And how I think for me, I have been very pleasantly surprised and feel very, very fortunate and grateful to say that I think somehow the opposite has occurred for us, that I feel like in pursuing this project, I actually feel like I've grown even closer
Yeah.
to my parents because it has been so much about them. I mean, I literally remember the very first time. So we actually ended up attracting sort of outside investor interest and raised funding for the company at one point. And I literally like sent my parents like the picture of,
Oh,
like that first check that came in, and it was like, guys, like this is what our little project has turned into. It was just this really incredible moment. And they've been incredibly supportive the whole way, which I'm very grateful to them for, because they totally could have said, Amelia, this is absolutely crazy that you're doing this. But I can't tell you like how much they've pitched in to help out. I remember in the very early days, like literally my mom was helping me answer support emails. Like she was sitting next to me, like we were like answering emails together. Like she would, we were like, they've been a part of this in every way possible. They've been the inspiration for it. They've been my teammates along the way at various points. They've been like my cheerleaders. So it's been really cool, actually. Yeah.
that is, wow, that's awesome. That's so awesome. And they
It's such an unusual, I know it's such an unusual story, I feel like, for like a company origin story,
but you're doing something that's meaningful to your family and to any family that uses it, so it's just awesome that it has those roots as well. Who else is on, like, who's your team made up of these days?
yeah. So we're a team of 5. We're a tight-knit team of 5. And spread across the Bay Area and in New York. And so myself and my co-founder, so the two of us kind of really built Saga together. We come from technology backgrounds, which I feel like is sort of an interesting thing. So my co-founder Andrew used to work at Apple, and I used to work in technology startups. And Andrew had wanted to do the same thing for his parents. Like we were very united by this common vision of literally like this was something we built for our own families. And so I think we kind of felt like we come from these worlds where we've built technological products. Like literally that was our that's our careers.
Mm-hmm.
For all sorts of different problems. And this was a problem we felt so passionately about. And we were just kind of flabbergasted at how little actually like was out there just to make this really easy. And I feel like you guys have a very similar kind of mission and vision for the same thing. So and really our entire team is made up of people of engineers and designers and people who've built products in technology, and basically are really passionate about this problem and kind of want to figure out like how can we use all these incredible tools that exist in this day and age to make this just way easier for families everywhere.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And actually, we do have two questions that just came in from the audience that are connected to that. So one from Ken Mochizuki, who asks, transcribing an oral interview is the most tedious task ever. True. Does Saga include a method to transcribe a person talking into written words?
Oh, such a good question. I'm very excited about to hear that one. So we have been looking at transcription. I am very excited to hear that. So it is something that we've totally played around with, and that is something that you're interested in. Yeah, we would be happy to sort of chat with you about if you end up having recordings on Saga and would want to sort of transcribe them. We might have maybe I'll get you to sign up as one of our testers for a transcription feature. So it is definitely on our roadmap. Not built into the product like today, but like very much a thing that we're thinking about.
Oh, that's awesome. And then Paul asks, how is Saga interfacing with other platforms such as Densho, Ancestry, Jamp, here, Facebook, etc., other platforms that are also recording oral histories and interviews and things like that?
Great question. So the answer for Jamp is that we're starting that partnership right now. So I'd actually be super curious to hear. So one of the things that I know we've already been talking about, first of all, we've already started recording, I think, some of the incredible stories from your community. And then the other thing that we're doing on the Saga side is we'd love to sort of incorporate people's stories into, we do this thing, Heroes of Saga, where we also kind of celebrate people's stories publicly and take nominations from families to sort of elevate and celebrate like everyday people's stories. But if you've got ideas of what you'd love to see, I think we would love to hear what you want to see. And then we basically have ways in the app you can save and export basically any recording, so that you can send it easily to any other platform that you're on. So if you've got an Ancestry account, if you have a lot of people be like, oh, I've got like a WhatsApp group with my family, or like a group text with my family, can I pull out a story and like share it into there? And then we're also working on some new features to make it even easier to like integrate. Awesome. But that's where we are today. So yeah.
That's great. This is so exciting, Amelia. Thank you for sharing. And I know we're really excited to continue working with you and seeing what, this relationship between Jamp and Saga and our community and Saga can look like even after Tadaima is over. So thanks for your time. Is there anything I didn't ask you about that you would like to share, or any final parting thoughts about using Saga, anything like that?
Oh, I have one thing that I will bring up, which is that we've actually got some new features in the works, and we're looking for people who might be interested in testing. So if any of this catches your ear and you're like, yeah, I'll sign up to go see like a new version of like stuff that you're working on, and I would love if you would shoot me an email. It's just amelia@trysaga.com, and I would love to sort of give priority to anybody from this community who is interested in that.
Wow, that's exciting, really exciting. Thank you so much, Amelia. I know Kimiko dropped the website in the chat, and we can make sure to connect folks with you if they have comments or questions or want to be a tester. But thank you so much for sharing, and thanks for the work that you're doing to record these histories and stories.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And everyone watching along, thank you for your questions, and see you for our programming later today.